Here I am at my sewing machine, and before we get started actually stitching on the binding, I want to make a couple of suggestions for how you set up your machine to do this. The first suggestion I have, the first tip, is to use a walking foot. This walking foot is going to help in guiding all three layers through your machine at the same time, and I use it for any kind of machine-guided machine quilting that I do, whether it's stitch in the ditch, echo quilting, or even putting on bindings, cross-hatching, anything like that. A walking foot is essential, and it is an investment. They tend to be expensive, but they're worth it. Your machine quilting will look a lot better. I also have my needle so that it's ready to be needled down whenever I stop stitching, and that helps secure the position and not have any gaps in my stitching when I stop. And I also have, with my walking foot, I'm going to line up this binding along the inside edge, inside and right edge of this foot, and I've got my needle moved all the way over to that right edge so that it can just brush the edge of this binding as I stitch. So I'm going to fold over the binding by hand like this and put it under my presser foot. And I usually start somewhere near the bottom on the left hand side. That's the least visible place on your quilt. And my stitch length is set to 3, so it's a little bit longer so my stitches don't get buried. And I'm going to start stitching this. Now I'm using contrasting thread so you can see my stitches. And what I'm going to do as I reach the end is I'm going to fold the adjacent side binding over, but not all the way over. And that's going to help position the binding for the next side. So I'm going to pull this out, clip the threads. Now notice I did not back stitch. I will end up back stitching when we start again. I'm clipping my threads here. Alright, now when we turn, I am going to take this is where I ended stitching. I'm going to fold this over all the way down, and I'm going to start in this corner here, and I'm going to start by back stitching. So I'm going to put this down, and I'm going to take 2 or 3 stitches, and I'm going to back stitch to secure that binding. And then I'm going to continue lining up the edge of my binding with the edge of my foot, and I'm going to travel all the way down, stitch off the edge, lift up and clip. And then I'll do the same thing for each edge. I'm going to fold this one over. I'm going to make sure it's nicely placed under this foot. Take 2 or 3 stitches and then back stitch and continue on with the binding. And I'm guiding this by eye. I can't say that I have it, you know, like this edge of the quilt over a particular measurement. I'm guiding it by eye, the same way you would do with top stitching. So I'm lifting my presser foot and my needle, bringing it out, clipping it. Then I'm going to fold over. This is my next to the last edge. Bring this underneath my presser foot. Take 2 or 3 stitches, back stitch, and you don't notice the back stitching when you're using matching thread. Here it looks kind of lumpy, but it'll be very subtle when you're using matching thread. Here's my last edge. I stitch off of it, lift up, clip, and here I am going to meet my previous stitching where I started. So again, just like on all the other sides, I'm going to start stitching 2 or 3 times. I'm going to back stitch, and here I didn't pull my thread out of the way. I just need to move that out. And then continue stitching, using my fingers as a guide. And here I'm going to meet my previous stitching. I'm going to stitch on top of what I've already done and just take a stitch or two back. And then again I'm going to lift up, bring it out, and clip. And here I've got a fully finished self-binding. Now I'm going to clip all my threads. You'll have them on each corner from where you started, and then back stitched. And after you clip your threads, it looks nice and tidy. Let's see if I can zoom out here. And here we go. Your table runner has a nice self-binding. Now you can press that, and it acts as a regular binding would. And only it was much easier to do, and it matches your backing. So you've got a nice self-binding.